So yeah, thank you for having us. My name is Samantha Brown. I typically go by Sam, but either way is fine. I am a mental skills coach as part of our our company with Emily here, who we'll talk here in a second. The Elite Mind Academy. I also am a lead trainer and coach for a company who provides mental skills training for corporate companies and businesses. So leadership development, team development workshops, things of that nature. My background's a little bit unconventional. So I'm originally from Massachusetts, the Boston area, and I initially went to school because I wanted to pursue athletic training and sports medicine. So I did that for a couple of years and actually realized that my passion was more so with the mental component of physical rehabilitation and recovery. So I switched from the medical side and went into the psychology world. Got my undergraduate degree at Bridgewater State University in Massachusetts in the field of psychology. And then I pursued my master's degree in London, England, in the field of sport and performance psychology. So really just focused on the mental aspect of performing at your very best, especially under high levels of stress. Um, from there, that took me into my first job in the field, which was working for the military, for the United States Army. And I provided mental skills training for soldiers, for family members and civilians, um, through various, performances that they have to encounter. And yeah, I'm now here with Emily. I'll let her go ahead and introduce herself and
Hi.
share a little bit more.
Well, hello. My name is Emily Thompson. So yes, I'm also a co-owner of the Academy with Sam. And I also
that I was here.
Got my start with working with the United States Army. So currently I am a sport and performance psychology coach for the Army down at Fort Stewart, which is located right outside of Savannah. So kind of like Sam, I started up north. I grew up on Long Island. I was a career athlete. I played softball majority of my life. And I did go to school. I went to get my undergrad degree at Hofstra University in psychology and exercise science. Sports psychology wasn't as big or growing back when I was in school. So I kind of had to make up my own degree, but I absolutely loved being surrounded by athletes and like-minded individuals. And then when I went to grad school at Georgia Southern University, I found that niche program within the field of kinesiology, more specifically sports psychology. So when I was there, I was the head mental performance coach for an athletic department, also a collegiate softball coach as well. And then after my collegiate run, that's when I started with the military about 5 years ago. And then Sam and I created the Elite Mind Academy to get back to our roots working with athletes. We absolutely love working with athletes. We'll always see ourselves as athletes. So yeah, we're really excited to be here and chat sports psych with y'all.
I'm very, very happy to have both of you. I kind of want to invite everybody to turn their cameras on if you're able to, and if you feel comfortable, just because it makes it a little bit more personal, and really being able to make those connections, I think, is really important. So thank you all for those. And it also makes it easier for the people that we have on. Talking to faces is a little bit more comfortable than just to. So how would you describe performance anxiety, and do you think it's different from pregame jitters, or does it warrant intervention? So how would you explain?
Yeah. Do you want to go ahead and talk how you would define it, and I can talk about the jitters?
Yeah. So performance anxiety, I think it's so interesting. This is one of the most seeked out topics that Sam and I chat with our athletes about. Because performance anxiety can be perceived so differently from person to person. How I experience anxiety might be a million times different than the way that any of you all perceive anxiety or feel anxiety, whether that's before a performance, during a performance, or after a performance. So this concept of performance anxiety, It's really talking about you have a performance in whatever capacity that may be. It might be taking a test, it might be on the field, it might be at practice, it might be having a difficult conversation with somebody, and you're experiencing some sort of either physiological, so something that's going on in our body, type of response, or even a cognitive type of response. So having thoughts that are surrounded about worry or being nervous or concerned. And what we know within this field of sports psychology is that how we think directly impacts how we feel. So if we're perceiving different situations as threatening, whether that's threatening to our life or whether that's threatening towards our ego, or towards the success that we're perceiving ourselves to have, we're going to experience anxiety or the fight or flight system the same way, whether we have something that's actually physically dangerous to us or whether we just experienced a failure on the field or on the court. So performance anxiety really starts in our brains with how we are perceiving any type of situation within our life. And the good part about that is, since it starts with something that we can control, we also have strategies and techniques to intervene and help control how anxious we're feeling or how we are combating that performance anxiety or that physical anxiety that we're experiencing. So it's hard to kind of nail down a one size fits all definition, because we all experience anxiety so differently, whether that's in our day-to-day life, which is what we call trait anxiety, or whether that is during a certain performance or high pressure situation, which is what we call state anxiety. So how we experience anxiety is very different. However, it comes from the same place, which is how we're thinking about the situation.
Yeah, and the difference between performance anxiety and pregame jitters, both are quite common. We want to definitely normalize that if you all, as athletes, or if athletes who experience this, it is quite common. In fact, in recent studies from the past 2 to 3 years or so, they estimated that approximately 30 to 60% of athletes will experience some level of performance anxiety at some point, either before or during their performance. And the difference between performance jitters, pregame jitters, and performance anxiety is pregame jitters sometimes can be helpful. Some athletes actually thrive on that butterflies in the stomach type feeling. That's the natural adrenaline just pumping through your veins, as far as your excitement. You're ready to go. You're ready to hop out on the field and do what you usually do. Those feelings, those pregame jitters, tend to subside once you're actually playing, and that differentiates from this performance anxiety, which really is detrimental to performance. It starts to really become a threat to your overall quality performance, and all of the physical, behavioral, cognitive things that Emily was just alluding to really become heightened and start to even exacerbate throughout the course of the duration of the performance leading up to it, and then sometimes even straying along afterwards. So performance anxiety, not the greatest, but pregame jitters, often very common. In fact, I love a quote. I don't know if we have any hockey players on the call, but Sidney Crosby, who's a NHL player for the Pittsburgh Penguins. One thing that he has said before is that, I don't think you're human if you don't get nervous. So we all get nervous from time to time, regardless of what our performance is. Maybe it's even, before getting ready to take a test, right? If you're in class and you're getting ready to take that, or you have to give a presentation or a speech, that's normal. And I love the fact that Sidney Crosby just, normalized that for all of us. But that's really the difference between the pregame jitters and performance anxiety.
Awesome. Yeah, so I hope that kind of explains it a little bit better. And I think that you both just did explain it from the perspective of, what performance anxiety is, and kind of how it's good to be a little bit nervous. I think we all need that to really focus in. What do you think is the first step to overcoming that?
I think, in my opinion, the biggest step is to be more aware, to increase our awareness of situations that we're feeling this either somatic, this body anxiety, or this cognitive, like thought type of anxiety. And then also, like, what are our triggers? What are the specific instances or the specific performances that we're experiencing this anxiety? And then, majority of the time, the more we're aware, just simply aware of how we're thinking and how that's impacting how we're feeling, a lot of the time, that's kind of like, that's the intervention. It's just understanding, hey, I'm thinking in a certain way that's causing me to feel my heart rate increasing, or causing me to feel the butterflies in my stomach, or causing me to sweat or have the jitters or like muscle tension. And just by identifying, hey, I am thinking a certain way that's causing me to feel a certain way, we start to change the way we're thinking. So in my opinion, the biggest first step is just becoming more aware of how am I thinking, how am I perceiving different situations, and that what impact are those thoughts having on my body, or the way I'm feeling in any given moment.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think it's step one, self-awareness. Step two is that self-regulation. So addressing perhaps what are those fears that are underlying performance anxiety. Um, it can occur for so many different reasons. Age is a huge factor, especially within adolescence. It's performance anxiety is more prominent in that age range, just because of many societal pressures, or just the way that the brain is forming at that age. Also, it could be, pressure from what we call quote unquote helicopter parents, maybe putting a little bit too much pressure on kids to perform well. It could be an innate desire to just really show up and show off your skills. There could be so many different reasons, but in order to make some of those changes and take the next steps of addressing performance anxiety, and handling it more effectively, it all starts with recognizing that it's occurring in the first place.
And if I can just add to that too, that just caused me to think about how interrelated or how correlated or connected lack of self-confidence is to experiencing performance anxiety. Because if you think about it, if you're lacking confidence in your ability to be successful, that is probably going to drive thoughts of, oh, I'm not good enough. What if I fail? What if I don't live up to others' expectations? And those thoughts, if you were to all think that right now, probably already are driving some type of somatic anxiety or bodily type of anxiety. So within the research world, there's a really direct link between experiencing either increased or decreased amounts of self-confidence, and therefore either experiencing increased or decreased amounts of performance anxiety. So again, just becoming more self-aware of where this anxiety is coming from. It could be coming from these feelings of doubt or these thoughts surrounding doubt as well.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. I always like to have a little bit of insight on that, but I'm sure like other people do as well. I think you guys are having a good conversation just like this, but I think it's a good time reminder for everybody to kind of be taking some notes, because we'll ask for like your big takeaways from this conversation, this panel. So just right on to the next one. How would you recommend our campus captains, or helping out their other student athletes on campus, how would you recommend seeking support for performance anxiety, especially if schools don't have the resources that they need?
Yeah, which that's a great question, Andy. And it is quite common. There are plenty of schools out there that don't have a designated program to address some of these concerns. Many colleges out there, many campuses, many high schools even might have someone who's perhaps a counselor or, a psychologist by means. But to have a sport and performance psychology consultant, or a representative there who really has the training in the performance world, is ideal. Now, one thing that you can do, obviously, if you are someone who's experiencing performance anxiety, or if you have a teammate, a friend who you notice that, something might be off, that this isn't just a one-time thing, but it is a reoccurring factor, of course, similar to any of the conversations that come about with the hidden opponent, mental health, and kind of erasing some of the stigma, is just open up and normalize the conversation of performance anxiety in the first place. I think that that's a huge factor. Talking about it is better than not talking about it at all. So that's obviously one thing that you could do. Two is utilize resources that are out there. I mean, that's what we try to suggest from our company, that the Elite Mind Academy, is there are additional resources out there. It just might require an additional Google search, or lifting up the phone. I don't even know if people like make calls anymore, but maybe it's a text message, right? Like trying to find what is out there, who is out there, because there are plenty. And it's kind of like when you go to find a new dentist or a new doctor, you kind of have to try out a couple ones to figure out what works best for you. But there are additional resources out there, even if your school does not have one on site.
And I would even say doing your own research too. If maybe you're a little hesitant to reach out to different resources like the Elite Mind Academy or other sports psychology consultants, quite honestly, doing some research on like Google Scholar or different types of like textbooks, just reading up on where does sports psychology or where does performance anxiety come from, and what are some different tools or strategies that you can start implementing, and just kind of like trial and error. A lot of what we do with different athletes, it's a lot of trial and error, because there's no one size approach that's going to work for every human being or every athlete. So really just trying some different strategies. I know now there's so many different apps out there, but there are some apps that really talk about managing anxiety. So whether that's anxiety from a more trait perspective, just like anxiety on a day-to-day basis, or that state anxiety. So identifying different breathing patterns or practicing mindfulness meditation. There's so many different apps out there as well. So I think honestly, like Sam said, picking up the phone or the computer and doing some research on your own, and making sure that that research is backed up, because there are so many different websites and articles and blogs nowadays that it's overwhelming to weed out what's correct and what's not. So just making sure what you're reading is backed up. But I think the biggest thing that Sam said is normalizing it and understanding that, we all experience this at some point in our life. So by asking someone, that's not that sign of weakness. That's the sign of you are looking to better yourself in one way, shape, or form. And that's so freaking awesome. So
Yeah. So especially having like those coping mechanisms, although they can be similar, I think performance anxiety may be a little bit different than what is like general anxiety. So do you have like any insight on how you can tell the difference between the two?
Yeah, good question. So yes, there is a difference between generalized anxiety and generalized anxiety disorder, which is of course, a clinical diagnosis when compared to performance anxiety. And I think that one way to differentiate the two is generalized is general across multiple domains. That's when you just wake up and you're kind of anxious about the day, or social situations. There's many different factors that would trigger that fight or flight response, that anxiety response. The performance anxiety is very specific to performance itself. And that's just a simple way to kind of differentiate the two. I think that it is difficult to pinpoint what someone is experiencing when it comes to anything mental. The mental game is a very interesting game to play. And like Emily said, since specifically, performance anxiety might show up in a couple of different ways, behavioral, somatic, cognitive, we can't really see what people are thinking. So to rely on our thoughts alone, unless if those thoughts are being vocalized outwardly, it might be challenging. So really paying attention to the behaviors, the persistent pacing, or really just biting nails. I was a huge nail biter, before I played in my soccer games. So that was a huge thing for me. Or maybe it's a matter of noticing if someone's hyperventilating, right? And almost leading to what we would see as an anxiety attack. Those are some key indicators to kind of just pick up on, especially as a campus captain, and being on the lookout to determine, hey, should I just ask a question? Or maybe it's not so much calling out one person based off of certain symptoms or situations that you're seeing, but just opening up that conversation to, to not target one specific individual, because everyone's like Em said, everyone experiences this at some point or another. It might just look or feel different from person to person.
Yeah, and I think the key difference there is within performance anxiety, there is a high pressure situation, or you're perceiving the situation or the performance to be of importance to you. So again, that can be in any capacity, whether that's within sport, whether that's in school, whether that's at home or with your friends. The difference really is that this anxiety can come and go based on how much pressure you're perceiving the situation to have. So usually this happens in performances that you deem important, that are important to you, whether you're successful or not so successful. And within the general anxiety, this is, like Sam said, this is more of a disposition. It's more of a learned behavior, or it might be even something that we're born with. So just noting the difference, just because we have, that trait anxiety, or we're more dispositionally anxious people, doesn't necessarily mean we're going to have performance anxiety, or vice versa. So they're very separate things. But noting the difference and some of the concepts that Sam was talking about are super key when noticing that difference.
Yeah, and to that point, I see Kaylin's question here. Excellent question, Kaylin. So the question here, could the performance anxiety be based on environment of, all people around you, like a coach? Absolutely, right? Because if you're feeling pressure that perhaps a coach is putting on you, or your teammates are, or to Emily's point, you're perceiving this pressure on yourself, right? I think that any type of environment might impact someone to experience symptoms of performance anxiety. Do you want to add anything to that?
I think you hit the nail on the head there. There are certain situations or certain instances or certain people that I know in my experience, I am more anxious just being in those environments or being around some people. And that's usually because of past experiences, or that's usually because we are predicting their behavior. So with the example of a coach, I might become more anxious in the middle of a game if I am predicting that my coach will be mad at me if I don't do well. So, and a lot of the times those predictions come from past experiences. So whether that is in the past, maybe I made an error or I made a mistake and I saw that he had a disappointed look on his face or their face. And that's causing me to kind of mind read what they're thinking in the current moment. So definitely there can be patterns in how I am feeling when it comes to certain individuals or certain environments. And also those patterns can be broken based off of different trainings that you all can start up in, different techniques or different different strategies of thought awareness, thought replacement, many different things that we can talk about within this field of sports psych. So that's a really awesome question.
Awesome. I think that this kind of piggybacks off of what Kaylin was saying. And if you already answered this question, I'm sorry, but if a coach is kind of like sweeping things under the rug, what do you recommend that they do, if you have any recommendations? Because I know that can be really tough to find that support, especially from coaches.
Yeah, I can speak from experience with that. I had a lot of coaches. I experienced a lot of performance anxiety throughout my athletic career, and that caused me to not perform at my optimal level a lot of times, whether that was slumps, whether that was just a lack of confidence. And a lot of the times, I just don't think my coaches were aware of what was going on. So when they saw me get worked up, or they saw me get anxious, physically anxious or visually anxious, I would hear a lot of, hey, just calm down. Like, hey, just breathe. You're fine. Like, leave the past in the past. But I was missing the how. I didn't know how to do that. And it would get me more worked up, because I'm like, okay, you're telling me to breathe, but I don't know what you mean. I'm breathing right now. What are you talking about? Or you're telling me to calm down. That's not helping me calm down. That's making the situation worse. So unfortunately, I think a lot of times when coaches are sweeping this under the rug, it usually comes from a lack of understanding what's going on. especially like we talked about before. Individuals experience performance anxiety in different ways. So maybe a coach has experienced this type of anxiety differently in the past, and that's not lining up with how you're experiencing in the moment. So I wish I had like the right answer of how to perfectly handle that situation. It might come down to having an important conversation with them, kind of one on one, letting them know, like, hey, this is what I'm experiencing. This is what helps me in these scenarios. This is what doesn't help me in these scenarios. Because you want your coach to be your advocate. You want your coach to be on your side. And I'm sure they are on your side. They want to be there for you and they want to help you. Just educating them on how to do so that is best for you as an individual. I think that might be a way to mitigate it, or at least the first step in help in that situation.
Yeah, I agree. I love what you're talking about, Em, as far as having the conversation. And, when Emily and I met and started working for the Army, and like Em said, she still works there at Fort Stewart. What's coming to mind is having some individuals who've been in the military for many, many years, and they are so used to just, if you fall down, scrape your knee, rub some dirt on it kind of mentality, right? So to talk to these types of individuals who really believe that sports psychology or a topic such as performance anxiety either doesn't exist or it's, soft or it's wimpy, whatever their initial beliefs may be, that was always a challenge for us. And, it still is to this day to kind of shed light on the impact and the importance of addressing some of these particular concerns and things that come up when it comes to discussing performance related issues. It's hard. And like Em said, hopefully you do have coaches, or athletes do have coaches who are all about the holistic athlete and really paying attention to everything, just aside, not just the physical, component of it, but also making sure that mentally everything's in check, because everything's so connected. But in that instance, if you have someone who is just not really bought into the idea, yes, a conversation can be there and you can talk to each other. You could talk to us even, of how to craft that conversation to be most effective and really hit home the specifics of what performance anxiety is and also what it isn't. And in addition to, if that doesn't work to, get that buy-in from your coach, it starts with the self. So taking advantage of resources like sports psychology consultants or each other or research and resources that currently exist out there, to just really better yourself as someone who might be experiencing it. Or if you're someone who does not experience performance anxiety, but you have someone who does, then perhaps it's, doing the work on your own so that you can be an advocate to address performance anxiety, on its head before it manifests into something much more. We have a couple of questions here, and I kind of want to address. I had a direct message, about something that I think I asked if it was okay to bring it to the group. So the question is, are there any mantras, common sayings, or just things to say in general to yourself when an athlete is having a stressful time? So for example, something to say to themselves when you're on the line, you're getting ready to go off the blocks for a race. I love this. I love this topic. So yes, absolutely. Anything that you say to yourself that can work in your favor is effective. So when we were talking about how sports psychology is really rooted in this idea of cognitive behavioral, theory. So how our thoughts, our cognitions impact our behaviors or our reactions, our responses. So if you have a particular thought, a saying, a mantra that really drives the emotional state that is desirable for you, that works in your favor, maybe it helps to more effectively manage the physiological responses that you're experiencing in that moment, that saying works for you. And it could be something as simple as just do it. It could be the entire Eye of the Tiger song, whatever it is for you that drives you to be in this state where you feel like your performance is in check. The level of arousal or anxiety is just enough so that you can perform at your very best. And the quality of your performance is, less up to chance. You have a little bit more control. I would say anything goes. So there's really no one particular answer there to answer that question. It's essentially what works for you to bring you to that productive, most productive state. And anything else?
No, I think you've said it very nicely. And I think it's just something I wanted to mention is a lot of what we talk about and a lot of what performance psychology coaches within the field talk about stems from this theory of cognitive behavioral theory. So essentially, how we think impacts what we do every single second of the day. So if we can target our thoughts, so whether that's proactively, so before a performance, talking about identifying a mantra or identifying just a slogan or a sentence that's going to help either pump us up or help us calm down. That could be a really great tactic for some individuals. So yeah, that's a really good answer. Andy, do you want us to continue answering these questions in the chat, or do you want us to hold off?
Yeah, I mean, the questions in the chat I think are good. If you get like multiple questions that have like the same topic, I think that touching on that is okay.
Okay.
And then yeah, I think that we can continue to go with that for a little while. If I have a question that like pops in my head, I can ask, but yeah, just keep doing your thing.
Perfect. Okay, so let's see. So Mary asked, so how's the relationship between lack of confidence and performance anxiety related to choking? This is such an interesting topic to me. So let's talk about this relationship real quick. So I know we touched on it a bit before, but when we're perceiving that we don't have the skill or ability to be successful, that's essentially the definition of confidence. It's either I am confident in my ability to be successful, or I am doubtful that I have what it takes to be successful in this moment. So when I am thinking that I am not good enough to be successful, it makes sense that I'm going to experience some form of anxiety, whether that is, that increased heart rate, or maybe my breathing is all out of whack, or I'm experiencing butterflies in my stomach, or I'm super shaky. And then when I'm experiencing all of those symptoms, what happens? I start thinking about how I'm experiencing all of these symptoms and how a confident person shouldn't be experiencing all of this, or somebody who has what it takes shouldn't be feeling like this. And this concept of choking is so interesting because it can come from many different areas. But one of the biggest reasons that individuals or athletes choke is because we're so internally focused on something that's not going right. So this is a concept called paralysis by analysis. It's I am over analyzing what's going on within my body or within my mind, and I'm so stuck on it that I physically cannot focus on the performance. And that's causing my technique to go down the drain. That's causing my focus to not be paying attention to what I need to focus on. And that in turn can cause us to quote unquote choke. So, and again, that's not the case for everybody. Sometimes we're just so externally focused where we can't choose one thing to focus our attention on, that we become so overwhelmed that we choke. But a majority of the time, it's this concept of paralysis by analysis. So I'm not able to perform because I'm analyzing internal sensations or internal thoughts too much.
Question on that though. So I think that the first thing that popped into my head is like, how do you turn that off? Right. And you probably can't, but I do want your insight.
Yeah. So turning off where my attention is, or
So like over analyzing and like, kind of freezing in the moment or choking when we are analyzing what's going on, whether it's our body or our mind or the situation.
Oh, so such a great question. So I'll quickly touch on this, and I'm going to throw it to you, Sam. I don't want to talk forever, but this is something I'm very passionate about because I experienced it so much. To answer the question, how do you turn it off? It all starts with practicing. You can't expect to go into practice or go into the gym and perform a new lift flawlessly if you've never done it before. So same thing with mental skills. We have to become very aware and very good at deliberately practicing, becoming aware of our thoughts, implementing thought replacement strategies, becoming more aware of where is my attention. And the more we can practice this in the small tasks, quote unquote, small tasks, for example, during practice, or not in high pressure situations. The goal is for that muscle memory. So for us to become a little more automatic in our technique, and by doing so, we're not going to be so stuck in our brains. So that's just my first thought about it. I'm curious what Sam has to say though.
No, I totally agree. I think it really does come down to the tools that you have in your toolbox. And what I mean by that is anytime that I'm talking about mental skills training, I use this analogy of having tools in a toolbox. So, I have a toolbox here at my house, and inside I have, my drill and my screwdriver and my hammer. And that's all well and good. Not every job of things that I have to fix around my house require that drill or the hammer or the screwdriver. Each job, each situation that comes up might call for a different tool. And that's the same with the situations that we're in. So the more tools that you have in your toolbox, the easier it'll be to just reach into that toolbox and grab what you need. And when it comes to confidence and choking, there's plenty of skills out there that when learned and practiced, to M's point, in a not so stressful environment, so that you're getting a feel for how these tools work for you and kind of figuring out the perfect concoction for what helps Lauren versus what helps Jillian, which is different from what helps Kate, right? Everyone has their own perfect recipe of tools to help them in those given situations. And when it comes to kind of shutting down the overthinking, I think that it just depends from person to person. And it all starts from trying it out. It all starts from the knowledge of tools that are out there.
Can you give an example of some of those tools?
Absolutely. So I think the biggest thing, the one that's coming to mind for me, that we've been really, you know, lucky to be a part of is this idea of mindfulness. And so the idea of mindfulness, if you're unfamiliar with it, is to just have present moment awareness. There's so many different things that are going on every single day, things that are happening inside of our brain, different physical sensations that are going on, external stimuli. And the goal of mindfulness is to notice all of those things, accept them for what they are rather than what sometimes our brain makes it out to be, and then move on to the next thing and not get so fixated or stuck on one particular aspect. So a lot of the athletes that we work with at the Elite Mind Academy, we implement a mindfulness-based program because there's so much research and a lot of benefits that can really come from just really sitting down and practicing staying in the present moment, which would help with some of that overthinking or overanalyzing. Any particular tool that stands out to you?
I mean, a really great tool that we talk a lot about when it comes to performance anxiety or this paralysis by analysis or getting too stuck in our heads is just this concept of breathing, but just doing it in a very specific and deliberate way. So the breathing techniques that we talk about are diaphragmatic breathing or tactical breathing. So it's instead of breathing with our chests, it's breathing with our bellies, breathing with our diaphragm. And that actually does something internally that helps us decrease the amount of fight or flight that we're feeling, or our heart rate increase, our breathing rate increase, our muscle tension. And it helps us somatically, or our body calm down a bit. So that's a technique. Again, it has to be practiced. It's not one of those things where you just go into a performance or pre-performance and try it out and see what happens without actually practicing it. But that is one of the techniques that we utilize that usually has a pretty rapid effect and helps pretty quickly if done the right way.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that those are two like extremely great skills, and I can speak from experience. It does take a lot of practice. As Emily said, do not try to just practice it. If you've got a big game and you're like, oh yeah, I remember this conversation that we had like a couple weeks ago, I'm going to try this. It's going to take some practice. So I do want to reiterate that.
We often use this analogy that you think of whatever your favorite sports team is, and I'm sorry for those people who hate the New England Patriots. I'm a Pats fan, being from Boston. Emily's shaking her head. She's Jets. It's fine. Oh, Natalie, you Pats or Jets? Pats?
Hats.
Oh, my girl. All right. So Natalie's with me. So you think of the Pats, right? Or whatever that team is. They're not going to go into Super Bowl Sunday, all of a sudden, hey, let's run this brand new play. they're going to use the time leading up to Super Bowl Sunday to really practice and hone their craft and hone their skills. And the same goes for mental skills training, right? You can't go into the gym and do one crunch or one sit up and expect to have a six pack. I surely wish that that was the case. Unfortunately, it's not. So it's just like any other muscle in your body that you have to work. Same goes for your mind. So the more time and effort and energy you put into establishing that mental game, the more at the ready you'll be when you experience something such as performance anxiety in the moment.
Yeah, and it's one thing to say that, yeah, we need to practice. I'm sorry, I'm looking at all of these.
I am too. I want to.
Andy,
Andy, great game last night.
Yep.
Pepsi Cats next Sunday. Yes. Okay. Ooh, what was I just saying? With practicing skills. So there's this concept. It's called neuroplasticity, and what this term is a sciencey term that essentially says if you practice thinking in new ways, that you can change the way your brain works. So when we're talking about thinking more effectively so that we're driving more productive feelings inside of our body rather than like anxiety, this is something that needs to be practiced so we can literally change the structure of our brain and the way that it works so that it becomes your new norm. It becomes your new pattern of thinking, rather than automatically going to worst case scenario or thinking of the what ifs or thinking of past errors or mistakes that we made. We're retraining our brain to think in more productive ways, but that takes a lot of practice to do.
Yeah, I absolutely love that term. It was one of my favorites when I was in school, and using that with coaches as well, because they might not have ever heard the term before. Obviously, do your research on it, and it's all about having not the fixed mindset, but being able to overcome different I don't know if you call it habits, but you're able to change your thinking. I guess just to kind of wrap it all up, if nobody else has any other questions that they want to get to, what do you think is the overall arching theme from today? If we could maybe touch on how to recognize performance anxiety, how to combat it, and maybe help out a friend. And then if you two want to kind of give some information on what you do, where to contact you, all of those things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, William, you really want to know about the yips. We'll totally talk about the yips. I think that Emily has had experience maybe working with someone with the yips, so we will for sure get to that a little bit. But yes, I know that there's a couple of questions here. And hopefully at the end, we don't mind to stay a little bit later if anyone needs to, if you want to have answers to those questions. But to your point, Andy, so overarching theme as far as performance anxiety goes, I think a big key takeaway is to, one, normalize it, right? That it happens to so many different people, regardless of level of competitive play. Professional athletes experience it all the time. They just have the practice and put in the effort, and also utilize resources to help effectively navigate when those situations arise. So normalizing the fact that performance anxiety occurs and how to recognize it, again, when it typically shows up is when there is that performance that you deem is high stress, you really care about it, and it's more of a prolonged effect from that cognitive, the behavioral, the somatic, the physical, whichever domain. It's really presenting and manifesting in a larger scale. So that's a huge thing there. As far as, I'm trying to think of the other things that you mentioned, Andy. There was a how to help someone, I think.
Yeah, so it's kind of how to recognize it, how to help somebody in that moment. So kind of each question that we asked, I think there were three main themes from that. So if we could, how to recognize it, how to help somebody, and kind of what to do. So
yeah, so recognizing it, how to manage it, of course, the different skills that we're talking about, right? So whether it is that deliberate diaphragmatic breathing and taking some of those deep breaths to really kickstart a relaxation response. Great practice. Staying focused and in the present moment with the mindfulness, talking about strategies to reframe the way that you're thinking and boost that level of confidence through those statements or mantras. I know that we had a question in the chat about what do you do when people say that that's cheesy? You know what I tell them? Well, okay, cool. It's working for me. So that's important, right? And it all stems from what's going on internally. So as long as it is working for you, I don't think that it matters, quite frankly, what other people are thinking, because at the end of the day, it's you and you're in control of your own thoughts, your performance, the way that you're feeling, and the way that you're managing situations like performance anxiety. What else do you want to add?
The last thing you just said is really my biggest takeaway, is understanding that we have, I would say, majority of control. I wouldn't say full control, but I say a lot of control over the experience of performance anxiety, which is a good thing, because that means we have control of handling it, or helping it decrease, or helping ourselves experiencing more productive or effective emotions or physiological sensations. So number one, because a lot of the times when I was experiencing this performance anxiety, I really thought it was out of my control. I thought it was like, well, this is how it's always been when I step up to bat, or this is how it's always been when I go to take a test. So this is just how it is. This is just how I'm wired. And it wasn't until much later that I found out that it really wasn't just how it is. It would continue to be like that if I didn't intervene and I didn't do anything differently. So just understanding that we have control over how we're experiencing performance anxiety, and implementing different skills or strategies to help overcome that. I think that's really important to walk away with. And when talking about, what to do, whether it's for yourself or for another person, another strategy that you can start implementing immediately, whether it's yourself or helping a teammate or a friend out, is what I call brain dumping. So if you have a piece of paper, or you have your phone available, or you just have somewhere to write it down, if you're experiencing anxiety in the moment, dumping everything that's in your brain out onto a piece of paper. So if you're noticing that a teammate or a friend is experiencing anxiety, or seeing the visual effects, that could be a strategy, without getting too into the weeds of asking them, to tell me what's going on, or tell me what you're thinking about. This is more of like a private thing where you can just dump everything that you're thinking out onto a piece of paper, whether it's true, untrue, crazy, realistic, doesn't matter. And then once it's out of our brains, it's kind of easier to sort through. It's easier to think clearly. You can even just take that piece of paper, throw it away, get rid of it, let yourself know that these thoughts aren't defining me in this current moment. It's just a way or a strategy to help distance yourself. So that's a cool strategy to start implementing immediately. And you don't need much practice with that, which is good.
Yeah. If one of you wants to touch briefly on Kaylin's question, because I think that was the second time that she put it in, I want to make sure it gets answered. But then after that, I do want to make sure you tell everybody how to contact you, or where to find you on whether it's social media or anything else, like professional wise. And then if anybody else has questions, I'm sure Emily and Sam are okay with staying on a little bit longer. And then so after they kind of do that, everybody will be free to go after that.
Cool. So first, I want to make sure that we also answer William's question as well. So with the yips, for those of you that aren't familiar with the yips, it's this phenomenon, this insane thing that happens to some athletes, where it's almost like their body just forgets how to perform in any capacity. So it happens a lot with golf and pitchers. I've seen it with as well, where their technique just goes out the door, and they literally cannot throw a ball over the plate, or they cannot swing their golf club to make contact to save their life. So I said in the beginning that it's a phenomenon, because it's truly something that, as research shows, we don't know the root of what causes this. However, different strategies, different interventions, different programs could be implemented to help find the root cause for that specific individual, and then help them implement different strategies to essentially take control back over their body, over their technique, and help them perform in a capacity that is more true to their ability. So sometimes that can come from talking about, before that paralysis by analysis, talking about we're so internally focused and that completely detracts from our ability to perform. Sometimes it could have something to do with the confidence or the lack thereof that we're experiencing. So it's very interesting concept that I wish I had a more concrete answer of if there was like a approach that worked best for an individual with the yips. Unfortunately, I think it is very individualized. But yeah, I have worked with an individual before. She was a catcher, and it was insane to watch because it's like this collegiate athlete that just almost forgot how to play. And with time and practice and really deliberate effort, we were able to work through it after a little bit. So
Awesome. Yeah, and I know for the sake of time, I know that Kaylin had put that question in there twice. So we can wrap on that question. We'll give you some information about how to reach out to us, like Andy said, and then if anyone has to hop, feel free, but we can for sure make sure that we stay on to answer the remaining questions. But I think this is very important, Kaylin, that you're bringing up. So how do you bring a conversation up with a coach or an AD about the environment on the court and how you as a player are feeling without feeling guilty or like a poor sport? Part of mental skills training is having to deal with the mental component of having difficult conversations like this, or more effectively being a team member or a leader. So yes, it's an individual performance related conversation at times, but also how do we instill the confidence to navigate a difficult conversation like this? There's plenty of frameworks out there that we've used with different athletes, different performers that we work with. Many of the corporate leaders that I currently work with during my 9-to-5 job as well, on how to essentially do your homework ahead of time and having these conversations, prepping the conversation up front to really outline what is the context of why you're addressing this with your coach or athletic director, giving some concrete examples and observations, and really talking about the impact of what this environment is doing for not only you, but for the other individuals on the court, the field, etc. And then also collaborating with them on next steps. So I know that's a lot of information, just kind of in a short amount of time. It does come down to, I think, a lot of the thoughts that we were talking about before, the different thoughts that can sort of take over our logical thinking and take over and say things that, oh, now you should feel guilty for saying this, or, Sam, you're a poor sport for bringing this up. That's just, our brains lying to us. And if we can do what I see another question in here is about reframing our thoughts to work more in our favor and taking a particular thought that might be ineffective or counterproductive and flipping it on its head so that it can work for us. That might be a first step in that right direction of successfully navigating that type of conversation, Caitlin. So we can for sure give more information and strategies to really help, formulate some of that. I think a lot of it does come down to providing valuable resources, research that's out there, leveraging like the Elite Mind Academy to kind of advocate for some of that as well. So if that's something that you're really interested in, here, I'm actually going to go ahead and put our email address here in the chat. Feel free. Oh, you did? Oh, perfect. You're 3 steps ahead of me. Excellent. Yeah, so reach out to us and we can for sure kind of help you out as far as, some next steps there.
Yeah, and I also put our website in the chat as well if you're interested in just learning a little bit more about the Elite Mind Academy. We have links to all of our socials there. We have a direct line of contact to us there if you wanted to ask some more questions. I can talk about this kind of stuff all day, every day, 24/7. I'm so passionate about this. And I just saw one other question I wanted to touch on. If there were any go-to resources that we would recommend pointing people towards, rather than just saying like, go find a sports psych. Yeah, absolutely. There is an association. It's called the Association for Applied Sports Psychology, AASP. You just type it into Google. And this is a nationally accredited association that certifies mental performance consultants. So I've been trying to figure out a way to relate this to another field, maybe like a registered nurse, how you would have to go through many, many hours of practicum and then mentored experience, and then you have to take a really big exam. We have the same thing in our field, and it's through this Association for Applied Sports Psychology. So on that website, we have our own journal. So it's the Journal for Applied Sports Psychology. So there are so many different articles that you can find there. They also have a directory of certified mental performance coaches. So you can look up based off of your geographical location. You can find individuals that are certified through ASP that are within the field of sports psychology to talk with. Other than that, I mean, really any type of research surrounding the field of performance enhancement, the field of kinesiology, any of those types of searches that you might do on a Google Scholar or something like that, that might be a good first step. But definitely, I will put the link. Oh, Sam already did it. Look at that. The Association for Applied Sports Psychology. Again, just jot it into Google and it'll bring you to that website. Let's see.
You sort of touched on Madison's point of thought replacement. So yeah, thought replacement is just taking a particular thought. Our thoughts happen so rapidly, right? So pumping the brakes a little bit, taking a look at one particular thought in its entirety and determine, is this thought essentially working for me or is it working against me? And what I mean by that is it driving or producing the desirable, the effective results, the feelings that I want to be feeling, the physical sensations or physical state that I need to be feeling in this moment? And if it is, then that's great. That is a thought that is productive. It's effective for you. If that thought is driving counterproductive thoughts, feelings, emotions, physical reactions, then that's where a thought replacement strategy might be coming into play. So we have an entire toolbox of different strategies to do due to this process of thought replacement. And it could just be as simple as interrupting that counterproductive or ineffective thought and using one of those mantras that you're talking about to really hit home the confidence that you need, the motivation or drive that you're looking for. It could be, let's see, it could just be an overall perspective shift of just kind of sitting with your thoughts, journaling it down, like Emily said, brain dumping it, and really determine, hey, what's working here for me? This might look different from person to person. So that's another area of focus that we do a lot with our athletes, is talking about the various thoughts and encouraging them throughout the course of the day to just reflect a little bit on the types of thoughts that they're having, and then figure out the best way to take that thought, spin it on its head, and replace it with something that's a little bit more productive.
Yeah, definitely. So I see if a question from Mackenzie. So if you all can contact us about speaking with their own individual athletic programs over Zoom, absolutely. So within the Elite Mind Academy, we do a majority of our consultations via Zoom because it leaves very little geographical limitations, and we're able to really meet anytime, any place. So it's pretty conducive to today's environment and today's lifestyle. But absolutely, if you would want to connect us, we can either give them more information on who we are, what we do, what types of trainings we provide. Because sometimes athletic directors are not aware that there even is a field of sports psychology. So sometimes they don't know how to help because they're not informed on that there are people out there to help. So if you wanted to connect us, we can absolutely introduce the field. We can introduce who we are, what we do. We can introduce how it is that we can best help, whether it's team-based, whether it's coach-based, whether it's individual-based. There's so many different avenues that we have worked with athletes or teams or groups in general, and so many different opportunities to do that in the future as well. So for sure.
Any other questions that you want to ask the larger group? Of course, if y'all have to go, feel free. Thank you so much for being here. We had an awesome time chatting with you all. So if you need to go, you're welcome to leave. If you want to stick around and ask any more questions, we'll stick on for a couple more minutes.
Yeah, thank you all so much. This made my heart happy talking about this with you all, and that you're interested in this topic and in just the field of sports psychology in general. If you are thinking about reaching out, please do. We're cool.
We're
But yeah,
hip.
if anybody has questions, totally feel free. We'll hang out for a little bit.